Inside Trading online. It's live now on afl.com.au and the AFL app. It's all the news in relation to contracts, drafts and trades. Calculating Callum Twomey is the man that pens it, and he joins us. G'day, Calculating.
Good morning, Garry. Good morning, Tim. How are you guys?
We're going well. You got a bit of a free agency special for us today.
Still 100 free agents on the board as we enter round 6. So only a few names have been wiped off the list in the past couple of months. Clubs are still waiting to get the official bandings off the restricted versus unrestricted players. But the biggest name, guys, on the list is Degoey, and he's perhaps in career best form to start this year. He's hit the ground running, was excellent again last week against Brisbane with 4 goals. Now, the update with him is that he wanted to get in some games before getting into any contract talks. But the good thing for the Magpies is that his manager, Ryan Bay, is keen to start talks very soon on a new deal. So obviously a free agent. He'll be a restricted free agent when those bannings come through, but there'll be discussions on length and pay and what that could look like. But certainly a good sign for the Pies that he's keen to open things up. And the Goey has clearly fitted in really well under coach Craig McRae. So the interesting bit, I guess, will be the tenure in terms of where that lands. And given Collingwood recently signed Darcy Moore to a 6-year deal as a free agent, but certainly good signs that he's keen to get talks underway pretty soon.
Well, Calculating, I spoke about Degoey yesterday, and I had an irate Collingwood fan who I know very well rang me yesterday and said there is no way known that Degoey can go anywhere because he owes Collingwood. What do you say to that, Garry? Does he owe Collingwood?
I would say yes, but I don't know whether Jordan sees it that way. He might be a bit more pragmatic and the cold hard light of day. Well, you owe someone how much, he might turn around and say, I've given pretty good service across the journey, and when the contract's out, that's open slather. You threw Essendon into the mix, which set the news hounds off yesterday.
I did throw them into the mix because he is he's a great he's potentially a great player. He's not a great player yet, but he's got great talent, and if he You're with the most influential voice down there.
No,
I'm not. But I threw him into the mix because they still need some very talented players. And I think that he may have reached that level of maturity whereby he's going to be able to pull it all together and actually fulfill his enormous potential on a more consistent basis, which he's already showing he can do out there on the field.
I heard someone talk about this yesterday. Actually, it might have been Pipe. And he said nothing, and I repeat, nothing happens at Essendon that you don't know about.
That is not true. Anyway, Calculating, keep going.
Well, I don't mind that one. They have one Jake Stringer. You can try and get 2. And the thing about the Bombers is they've got salary cap space, which we know as well. And as a free agent, they don't have to give up their trade capital, which at the moment is looking like a pretty early pick. So there's some things that could work there.
Caleb Daniel?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, Garry, the small player has become sort of like the diamond in the rough, haven't they? You look at, say, Dylan Moore, what he's producing at Hawthorn.
You love Dylan
You look at Jack Sinclair, what he's producing at St Kilda. And then Caleb Daniel, he's been doing it for the last couple of years. Where are they with his deal, Calculating?
Yeah, he's been fantastic. Big part of the success under Luke Beveridge, hasn't he been? Look, they re-signed free agent Jack McRae at the start of the year to a 5-year deal. Daniel has been one of their priorities since then and throughout that time. So he's getting pretty close to a new deal. It could be around the 4-year mark. They've got a big year of re-signings at the Dogs, and Daniel's obviously a part of that. But they manage their cap really well, and I think he'll be one of the next cabs off the rank there. So a good signs there for the Dogs too with Caleb Daniel.
Jake Lloyd?
Open talks now, Garry. So the Swans have a stacked group of free agents, but open talks there with the club on a new deal. He's a free agent this year. Likely to be a restricted free agent after he had a big offer from the Gold Coast the last time he signed up with the Swans. He's won 2 best of fairest since then. So one of the many Swans success stories from the rookie list and open talks there for a new deal.
Hey, Calculate, what sort of money are we talking about for somebody like a Caleb Daniel and a Jake Lloyd? What sort of, are they a $500,000-$600,000 a year type player, or is it heavier than that?
Yeah, I think it's around that. I mean, I think that Lloyd would be around that already, and Daniel might be sort of on the verge of that sort of money. Now, Lloyd's a couple of years older because he got drafted a couple of years older, so that makes his situation a little bit different. His money-maker deal might have been the last one, whereas Caleb Daniel sort of coming into that prime spot now. So, yeah, I think you'd be, as you say, around that 556 for Daniel would be around the point where you'd say that's about the right value for a player of his quality over a longer-term deal.
Alex Pearce and Kane Lambert, how are they tracking?
Well, they're a little bit different spot. They've both been waiting to get some games in before getting into contract talks on their free agency. That Alex Pearce had such an injury career, so he's one of the few key backs in the free agency pool this year. So strung a few games together this year so far. He was captain for the Dockers on the weekend against the Bombers, but hasn't yet entered into talks. So just keeping that at the moment on his footy. A little bit similar for Kane Lambert. We know he's been battling that hip injury for the recent months and has played a couple of VFL games now. I don't think that's going to be a discussion for contract talks for him yet, though, until he gets back into the senior side and gets some games under his belt. But a little bit different again. He started his career as a 23-year-old, so entering his free agency a little bit later than most.
Gary, you know, in calculating, I am a big fan of Dylan Moore and what he's been able to produce last year. And I know he was drafted back in 2017 and then he was put on the rookie list and now he is really producing. Garry, this question for you without notice before we do questions without notice, Cal, and you can join in this too. If you had to choose a player right now and pick them, who would you choose out of Cam Rayner and Dylan Moore?
Wow, that's two different names. I would say Rayner's upside is greater than Dylan Moore, but Dylan Moore's output is greater than Cam Rayner's.
Calculating?
No, I'm still sticking with Cam Rayner. I think he's come back after his knee. I think he's done a few good things to start this year. So I'm backing Cam Rayner in, but I understand the point. And it's another example of where smaller players, like Dylan Moore had a really good draft year. He just got pushed down the order because of size, and I think people started to look at what he wasn't as good at versus what he was good at. We knew his running ability then, so he probably should have been drafted a little bit higher. Not pick one level of Cam Rayner, but a little bit higher than he was in the end.
When you are small, you get marked hard, don't you?
Absolutely you do, and you need to be great at a few things. I know we spoke about Nick the Wizard Watson on last week's show.
And he's about the Wizard.
He is great. He's really good at a few things, so that's where he stands out. But you do need a few tricks and weapons that are really, really good to compensate for the reason that clubs will be knocking you down, and that's the height factor.
Lots of questions come through whilst you're talking. I'm not sure whether you've got intel on this. You know, the Dan McStay situation, what would your gut feel be there?
Yeah, well, I think there's a number of Victorian clubs looking at him. Talks have sort of been parked at the Lions. There's a number of clubs in Victoria looking for key position players. The same clubs that were looking at Ben King are the ones looking at Dan McStay. I think Collingwood's one to keep an eye on there. They've got some cash and they've obviously been looking for key position players, but they're amongst a number of clubs who will be looking at Dan McStay, and he's had some really good form recently.
I always love it. Always love it when you make comparisons between great players that are currently playing or running around the AFL. And you got a Petrarca-like player out there you're keeping an eye on. Is that right, calculating?
Yeah, just put a little bit of pressure on this fella. His name's Braden George. He's reminding me of Christian Petrarca when I saw Christian back in 2013 as a bottom-age player. Now, Christian spent most of his bottom-age year inside the forward 50, and he was just a bull down there. He tore Darcy Gardner to shreds in a final one day at TAT Cup level. Braden George plays for the Murray Bushrangers. He kicked 5 goals in round 1. He kicked a goal in round 2. Kicked 3 last weekend in the NAB League. Very exciting talent who is in the mix as a top 10 player at this point, and just reminds me so much of Christian as a bottom-age player. Before Christian moved into the midfield at his draft age, but Braden George, really powerful, great kick. You know, he comes from the Murray Bushrangers, so he played alongside Joshua Shelley last year. He's as good, if not better, kick than Joshua Shelley for goals.
What?
So, genuine power.
Genuine power. I've got a little list. I've got Wizard Watson and now Braden George. We're going to keep an eye on both of them.
Hey, Gary, let's open a book too. Who will be the first commentator to call him George Braden and not Braden George when he appears on the AFL next year?
You, probably. Very quickly, you wrote this week that the mid-season draft John Newcombe rule is going to be changed. Can you just explain that to us in 30 seconds?
Well, they're looking at it very quickly. So John Newcombe, just very quickly, last year was the only player to put on financial terms onto his head. 600 players nominated for the draft. He was the only one to do it under other terms. Now, that meant that he's paid very differently to other players out of the mid-season draft. He still ended up going to the Hawks at pick 2 because the Hawks had to grab him before other clubs did. But other clubs put up their flag last year and said, well, how come players who haven't been in the AFL system can nominate their financial terms? We know that Degoey couldn't do it at the end of the year. Rochelle couldn't do that at the end of the year. Jason Horne-Francis couldn't do that at the end of the year. So the AFL will be looking at that ahead of this year's mid-season draft to see if players such as John Newcombe, who haven't been through the system previously, can nominate terms, because we all know that nominating terms usually means that they're trying to get somewhere.
Very nicely done, and he is this week's NAB Rising Star, and what a talented player he is. Very nice work calculating.
See you next week, guys.